My name is Joe Weaver. Today we're going to be taking a pontoon boat tour around Lake Gage. Along the way we'll be pointing out some of the more historic places on the lake and some of the items of interest that still exist. Most items have been removed, but we'll have to use our imagination to figure out where they were. Years later, so this building was only used for 2 years, it fell into disrepair, and until the 1950s stayed that way. Then it was converted into probably one of the most unique residences on Lake Gage. Approximately where the White House stands to the right of the tower, it was a location of the toboggan slide, the water toboggan slide. It was also built as an attraction for the Shady Nook Hotel. Daredevils would go to the top of the hill and ride the toboggan slide down to the water. They had a Model T engine that would pump water to the top of the slide to make the ride slippery on the way down. It was a very popular attraction. People came from miles around to ride the toboggan.
When was that?
That was in about early 1920s.
How long was it?
It was until 26 or 27, 1926 or 27. The yellow house, as we see to the right of that, is the location where the Shady Nook Hotel stood. It was built in 1901 by two Angola businessmen who thought having a resort on a lake would be a good idea after watching what had happened on Hamilton Lake and Lake James. They bought this property that had 2 cottages at the time and constructed the hotel, which was in business until 1927. The first year that the hotel was in business, the rate was $7 a week for a room and a rowboat. After the hotel was torn down in 27, the lumber was used to build the 2 cottages to the right of that. At the top of the hill on our right, there's a brown building. That was the location of the Strauss grocery store. It was run by siblings Carl and Lucille Strauss for about 30 years. Carl would actually deliver groceries to properties on the lake via a rowboat. They got their start at the Shady Nook Hotel. They ran the grocery store there for several years before opening their own store. In the 1950s, late 1950s, the grocery store stopped operation, and this building was also converted into a very unique residence.
So it's the brown one up there?
When I was a boy, I used to come to the Strauss grocery when I was about 9 or 10 years old, and they had a big rack of comic books in this store, and in a front room that was like a porch. And they'd let you sit there and read the comic books all you wanted, as long as you bought a bottle of pop. So my friends and I would make a bottle of pop last, a whole day.
Yeah.
till we saw all the comic books. Boy, this is a nice day to be out on the lake now, isn't it? Just right.
One existing wall from the old house.
Oh.
That way you can build back in the same spot.
Keep the ordinance
Okay. All right, this is the side of the Lake Gage and Lime Lake Channel. In the early days, the 2 lakes were connected by a very narrow, shallow, natural channel. In 1936, the Works Progress Administration under President Franklin Roosevelt came out and dredged the channel. They lined the channel between the 2 lakes with rocks, very large rocks, and they built this stone bridge. Originally, the bridge had electric lights at the center on each side of the road. It's the only access between the 2 lakes to get through this bridge.
Different plans that they may do something with the bridge, is that through at all?
No, no. Well, there's been talk from time to time, but nothing has ever come of it.
There was some talk a short time ago about trying to put lights back on it.
Yeah, they are considering doing that.
So your realtors could develop it more if you could get bigger boats back in there, that's
Yeah.
what they want.
Yeah, and that's the people on the lakes don't want that.
Yeah.
Well, especially line work.
And I didn't figure there'd be any paint left on that, but
Okay, I've seen this before. How do they work?
Which?
How- The canopy that comes down on the side.
He's got an
They're
electric
both-
motor that it just rolls up like a
you're
blind. No. Yeah, it's the only one on the lake today.
I
It's that
saw
way.
one on James.
Did you?
Yeah. And I wondered how they got it, other than crawling
Yeah.
in and out of it.
Yeah,
An
they're,
electric
he's got a
motor.
little motor. He runs it up.
Worry about a cover.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is the site of what was the Kelso Gardens dance hall. It was built by an Orland businessman in the 1920s in the area that was known then as Panama. What was unique about the dance hall was that it had an inside and outside dance floor. The inside floor was glass and it was illuminated at night, so the dancers were actually dancing on light. It was in business for several years until a family named Bledsoe bought the property and closed it down because there was too much competition for their dance hall on Lake James. Big bands used to stop here between Detroit and Chicago. Count Basie was one of the bands that stopped. Jimmy Dorsey was here. Lionel Hampton was here, and a lot of local bands would perform here on weekends. It was a very popular place, and that was the reason that the Bledsoes purchased the property.
When was their heyday then?
It would be the mid-1920s, yeah.
So was it built right where the tan house?
Where the little yellow house is,
Oh,
it sits on part of the old foundation
Okay.
of of the dance hall. You can see some cement on the ground there, and
Yes.
toward the back. That's all that's left of it now. To the right of that area is an area called Panama. This was the first platted subdivision on this side of the lake. It was developed by a man named Lloyd Waterhouse. He called it Panama because he'd recently visited that country, and he came back here, purchased the land, and laid it out in such a way that there was a road between every 4 cottages to give it the semblance of a small village. The first house was built here in 1906.
Are any of those houses back there part of it?
No, none of the original homes or cottages exist any longer. But the lots are still the same. We're coming up now on the site of the St. Joseph Valley Line Railroad Station on Lake Gage. The railroad station was at the top of the road that you can see going up between the greenhouse and the gray one. The St. Joe Valley Line built a terminal specifically at that site so railroad passengers could come out to the lake on the train. Shady Nook would send a passenger boat across to pick them up, take them back across the lake to the hotel.
That's the one that came from along Orland Road. And
Yeah,
from
that's correct.
Sunset and then went into Orland.
That's right, yeah.
Right through
Yeah,
the front
yeah,
yard.
right through front. That's right.
Well, you can still see it along Orland Road in spots. Not all of it.
This isn't on our planned stop, but the gray house that's standing there was the site of another grocery store and a greenhouse and a bakery that back in the 1920s also. Once again, you have to use your imagination here because all these houses don't exist any longer.
You know when the campground was put in?
1960s, I believe, yeah.
Were Elliott's the one that did that? Store, 'cause
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
square and straight back. Of course, this, I always thought it was a store.
Yeah, yeah. People still call it that.
I know.
Yeah.
But this one,
Yeah,
and then it was that little restaurant you called.
yeah. Okay.
course, the hotel.
Yeah. The cream-colored cottage that we're passing now has quite a history on Lake Gage. It sits on the site of the very first rental property that was built here in 1890. In 1923, it was torn down, and this particular building was put up and was called Ottstott's Landing. It was the first grocery store on this side of the lake. After Ottstott's, it had several names. It was George's Grocery, the Lake Gage Trading Post, Lake Gage Galley and Pub, the Magic Grocery, and now it's been converted into a residence.
You didn't have it on the old stuff there,
We're passing now Concord Creek. This is the stream that connects Lake Gage with Crooked Lake. In the early days, one of the early settlers on Lake Gage built a sawmill back in the woods, and in that, or from that sawmill, he cut lumber for his farmstead, which was down on the corner of the lake. He had what they called a whipsaw, and it was run by water power. He cut all the lumber for his buildings back in that woods. The mill pond is still visible if you know what you're looking for. You can find the mill pond back in that woods. Okay, we're now passing what was called Clipper Landing. The brown cottage and the blue cottage to its left were a grocery store and general store in the 1930s. This was the site of the first house to be built on this side of the lake. That house was built in 1908. Both buildings that were the Clipper Landing area are still standing, and they've been converted into residences. But there's a lot of similarity. You can see now, if you look at old pictures, between the buildings that stand there now and the way they were 80 years ago. We're passing the site of the Butler homestead. Justice Butler was the first person to own property on this side of the lake. He had 367 acres of land on the east and south sides of the lake. He had in his house, he had a post office, a grocery store, and many other outbuildings. He went on to develop a lot of the property on this side of Lake Gage. His son Justice was a prominent, or became a prominent Subin County attorney, and was instrumental in further platting more of Lake Gage. All of the Butler buildings are gone. There's nothing remaining of those.
Farm was up the hill.
Just a ways, yeah. But there's a little white house. He did have a house there, a little rental property, and he had another place over there where the gray house stood. All this property that the Butlers owned on this side of the lake, there are still some Butler people who live around here, but they don't own any property on the lake anymore. They sold it all off.
Some of those those apartments or their houses, when did those come in?
They were built, let me think, about the 1950s, early 1950s. Yeah.
Were those apartments or were they
Yeah.
houses?
Yeah, they're apartments. Yeah.
Are they still, they convert them to houses now? Or?
No, there are still some apartments in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's one of the only apartment places on the lake anymore.
Yeah, I didn't think we were limited.
The area we're passing now was pretty much the end of the road around Lake Gage until the 1950s. The road started at the marina, it came around to about this point, and then stopped because a large swamp was just to the right of this. In the 1950s, the Cottage Association petitioned the county, and the county was instrumental in then extending the road through the swamp about another quarter of a mile so that it connected. The entire circumference of the lake then can be traveled by road. The association share of that expense was $400.
It's a little swamp now, rain.
No, it's been filled in, but there's still some swampland behind it.
Still behind it.
Yeah.
Well, there's an outlet down there somewhere.
Yeah, it's a small outlet. Okay, the Van Valkenburg place is the gray house behind the blue pontoon.
Because I know there should have been some vacant property.
Yeah,
Because they used to have a mobile home setting over there. I don't know if it still
yeah.
is or not.
There is one up on top of the hill.
But the one next to it's for sale.
Got that.
I know.
really?
I'm sure they did.
Young couple bought it. Okay.
All right, folks, that's the end of the tour. You have any questions I can answer or try to answer?
No, we're ready now for your.
So when the swamp was there, this wasn't developed then, is that correct?
That's correct. This was all filled in.
So this probably is the newest part then.
I'm sorry?
This is probably the newest part.
Yeah, pretty much.
That is one house.
Yeah.